Welcome to Let's Talk Business, where Square business owners share their stories, the biggest lessons they learned, and their plans for the future. I'm Elon Peso, Square small business evangelist and a former business owner. And today we're talking to Kat Alarkon from Quokka Coffee in Perth, Australia. Thank you so much for joining us, Kat.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Great to have you. Can't wait to
Thanks.
share your story.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. And with that, let's talk business. First, can you give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Kat. I'm actually currently based in Melbourne, Australia, but I run a cafe, as you mentioned, called Quokka Coffee in Perth, WA. We are a small little takeaway shop, super cute. We believe in radical empathy and ruthless kindness, and also changing the hospitality industry one coffee at a time. It's a tiny but mighty kind of cafe. That's the vibe.
I love it. And everything you make looks incredible. And I love just
Yeah,
the attention to coffee and that tasting picture shows all that. That's fantastic.
exactly. Attention to coffee, attention to detail. Those are actually photos of our like catering. We briefly dabbled in catering because I feel like with small business, you got to like try everything and see what sticks. There's
Yes,
science. There's a science to it.
absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, that's
Cool.
us.
I love it. So let's start at the beginning. What led you to start your business in the first place?
Sure. So it's one of those, and this is going to take us back a little bit. Sev 2020. I was actually laid off from at the time I was working a sales job, and I was laid off from that in around March/Feb 2020. And I was kind of just sitting in my room, going like, okay, well, what now? Up until that point, up until that sales job, I'd actually been working in and out of hospitality. I did like a journalism and sociology degree at uni at college, and very much like stepped into hospitality as a way to, as you do, it's a bit of a stopgap job between your real career, whatever that means. And yeah, got bit by the bug pretty much like straight away. I loved it. I was always surrounded by a crew of very like switched on human beings. And for me, you know, I stepped in and out of it, like I said, but I kept coming back because there was, again, a level of attention to detail and also just a love of service that really kept dragging me back in. But yeah, the cafe itself started because I was in one of those phases where I'd stepped out of hospital and then, yeah, got dragged back in again.
Amazing. And why specifically coffee and why specifically the business that you created?
Sure. That's a really good question. I'm definitely someone who is. I've always enjoyed coffee, drinking it, sort of smelling it. It's very much a cultural thing for us because my family's Filipino, and it was a thing that was around always growing up. And there's a lot of, as what happens with food, a lot of memories get tied and locked in that sense. But why coffee? Why this shop? I was really good at being a barista. um, Not straight away. It was very much a process. It took me a while to get there, but it got to the point where, working for other people, you start at the very bottom, as you always do, and as you should, washing dishes, cleaning up after people. And, over time, um, again, it was a bit of a process. I worked my way up to becoming a barista. I ended up also managing other people's cafes, and enjoyed that as well. I had to wear a lot of different hats at certain points in my hospital career. I was training a lot of people as well. And it got to the point where I was like, I had started to kind of develop the kind of shop that I wanted to run in my head, but I always had it in the back burner. I very much wanted something small, something manageable, something just easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And that's such a natural path of working in the industry and then deciding, hey, let's do it and jump in on your own. What was that sort of decision and process like of actually opening and starting your own business coming from just being a barista and managing others to take on your own?
Sure. Pretty terrifying. I it's a pretty common thread, I think, with other business owners, that recognition of maybe that little bit of vanity as well, of thinking like, oh, I can do better. I can do better than the people around me. I can do better than the people who are managing me. And like there's a grit and there's a stubbornness there as well. But a lot also what tempers that, I think, is a lot of terror as well. It might not work out. Um, but what helps you, I think, overcome that terror is like a belief that you're going to pull it off. Or even if you don't pull it off, you're going to figure out a way to pull it off at a later stage. So I guess stubbornness, we come back to this idea of stubbornness. Logistically, um, I'm someone who's pretty good about paperwork. And as I'm sure other business owners that you've spoken to before, like renting a brick and mortar, going through leasing agents and like property managers and like your local government and then your environmental health officer / your food inspector, like all of that stuff, like I weirdly actually enjoyed, which I don't know if I should say that on camera, but I really liked it. I basically also sunk my savings, what little of it I had. And luckily, I've got two very supportive parents who were very much like, here's a little extra just in case you need it. And so, yeah, the logistics of it were rather, for me, manageable. Um, and yeah, we've been open since, like it took a little while to set up. So I got laid off in 2020, and was basically planning from 2020 to about, I want to say like mid 2021. And then we opened our doors in August of 2021, and we've been open since.
Amazing. Incredible. Yeah, you're definitely the rare business owner that actually loves the paperwork and that loves the logistics. So that's a huge skill set and a massive superpower. In terms of hoping that things work out, how has the business been going in the last 2 years?
Yeah, pretty good. So dovetailing with like my love of paperwork, I actually still do a lot of the bookkeeping for the business still, just to, um, I don't know if it probably is a control thing. I'm aware this isn't like a psych session. This is literally just an interview, but it is, again, maybe like common thread with other entrepreneurs where like that sense of control, kicks in weird spots. So for me, the bookkeeping I've had a handle on since we opened. The accounting stuff, because that's all legal, like I've outsourced that. But just looking at our growth year on year, it has, like, we're small, but it's still manageable. And there has been growth over I think we're turning 3 or 4 this year. No, we're turning 3. um, yes, so growth. But I think for us, and for me anyway, it was very much engineered plus a little bit of organic growth. We have a lot of what I like to call day one customers. So these are people who showed up in 2021 and are still our regulars to this day. And to me, that is as good of an indicator of the health of your business as much as like the financials. And yeah, that's us. Like we're okay. Like, and I think for me also, for us as a team, being okay, and also hearing of, because a lot's changed since 2020, being okay is a good place to be compared to where the world is at the moment, where other businesses are at the moment. There's no secret sauce, I don't think. Like we've also just been incredibly lucky. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Controlled growth and just being okay is perfectly fine. Not every business needs to skyrocket and franchise and do a million locations. Like just being okay is good enough. Now you alluded to your role being a little bit different. Can you talk us through what your role looks like now?
Yes, I sure can. I actually, and this has been a theme in my life as well, of like just progression. I'm someone who, I find it really hard to sit still or like stay in a role for very long. So I'm not saying I got bored of being a business owner. I technically still am. But also, full disclosure, I now work for customer service, or customer success rather, at Square. And if I like take it a step back, right? So the steps that led up to that change in my life included becoming or qualifying as a super seller, which is how I met you and all of the other wonderful business owners as part of this program. Yeah, I was basically volunteering my time on top of like the day-to-day of Quokka, talking to other sellers, talking to people like yourself. And so I ended up moving to Melbourne December of last year, and got this job. And I've been wearing even more hats since.
Yeah, totally. It's been amazing for journey. Again, I same way. I had my business. I was just in the seller community, and then shifted over working for Square. And it's really cool that you've followed a similar path. And yeah, I'm very curious. For me, I sold my business and started working for Square. You are still owning your business and still managing in some ways and taking a full-time job. Where did that decision come from? How did you actually prepare for that? I have so many questions. Let's start with those.
Um, it's a lot of hubris, not gonna lie. Like, I definitely, that's a really good question. I think a lot of the seeds were sort of planted before the business even opened. Like someone being mildly neurotic and like into paperwork and systems and procedures, as I am, like I knew going in that I wanted something small because I wanted something where the standards could just be maintained at a very particular level. I wanted for our guests a very specific experience, in the sense of like the interaction with the regulars, with the customers, with the guests. It's very I'm not going to say orchestrated, but there is a rhythm to how we make the coffee, how we interact with people. It takes us, and I've timed it, it takes us about a minute and a half to make a coffee. But I always encourage the staff and any new people that come through our door, like take the extra 30 seconds to ask someone how their day is and make that a part of your script. Your job is not to make the coffee. Your job is to actually be a human being interacting with another human being. And that, for us anyway, that is what people pay for, is that person behind the counter asking how your kids are, asking how your pets are, how was your weekend, how was your holiday overseas for like 6 months, oh my God, you look super tan. Like that banter, that rapport, that is what people pay for. And that's what keeps people coming back. But I think your original question is like, well, why am I here? And how did I get here? And that's kind of it. Is like, I have a very specific way that I want that shop run. And I was able to train other people to be clones of myself. Not pure clones. Clones with like a little bit of their own personality mixed in. But the foundation, the procedures and the systems are very much things that I developed. Not overnight, very much throughout my hospitality career that I've just implemented at this shop. And what that's effectively done is freed up my time to pursue other things. Because again, I'm someone who's like, I don't like sitting still. That's a whole other conversation. And that's me.
Amazing. Yeah. So I'd love, if you want to, you could say no, but I'd love to dive a little bit deeper there. Like a similar mission at my shop was to essentially make myself obsolete, to set up systems in place that I could take a step back, that I could travel, that I could do something else. So I'd love to, if you want to share, why decide to do a full-time separate role as opposed to expanding the business or taking time off or anything else. Why do that owner position and take a step back completely and work somewhere else?
I think I'm still trying to unpack that myself. But I love how you said obsolete. Like specifically, that's such a specific thing to want. And I feel like it also shows a couple of things. There may be like a lack of ego, which I think is actually really important for the kind of role that you have as a business owner. But it got to a point for me where I was super burnt out, and like I was only maybe less than a year in. And the alarm bell started ringing. I was like, uh-oh, like, is this normal? Like, what the hell is going on? Why am I so tired all the time? Um, so it very much was a thing of like, sure, I went in with the intention of making myself obsolete as well. But it became more critical because I was starting to inflate my sense of identity with the shop, which classic happens to everyone. And is probably still actually happening to me right now. Um, but again, different conversation. In terms of how I address that, it was very much an incremental. It's still a work in progress, I think, for me. But what allowed me to, I'm not saying my personality is like completely divested from the shop, but it's far enough removed that it's a lot better for my mental health, and that included pursuing a full-time job with Square, because working for Square now while running my business remotely, like, full disclosure, I have a manager in place who is lovely and wonderful and is basically me. um, it's given me a sense of freedom that I didn't have, and I didn't realize I was craving in when I was in the weeds. And it's a journey, not a destination. I'm discovering new things every day. I've gone off on a tangent. I don't remember your original question, but I feel like I'm answering,
Yeah.
sort of.
No, that was exactly it. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. That's such I believe a common experience. Personally, it's a very similar thing for me. I was getting very burnt out with all of the things in running a business, and didn't know what to do with that. And my identity was completely, I owned an ice cream shop. I did it since I was a kid. So I could totally see you took the step that I wish that I thought of, which is recognizing that and working to divest yourself. And that's huge. How has, what has been your role with the business now? Like, what things are you still doing?
Paying my staff on time. And that's important. That was always important for me because, again, I think there's other stuff too, but I'm so passionate about replicating also my experience, my very specific experiences when I was working for other people. I've had a lot of like really crappy bosses, and really crappy workplaces, but one of my very early jobs really set the tone for what I think hospitality as an industry should look like. And I don't think I've ever told them, but these old bosses of mine, but like that experience, that tone setting, the DNA of that is actually like the DNA of the shop of Quokka at the moment. It's very much a business where I want people to come in and actually look at hospitality, being a barista, being a manager as a viable career path. And for me, in terms of my day-to-day responsibilities now, it is very much just like checking in with them throughout the week. We're only open from like 6 to 1, Monday to Friday. Like it's tiny. It takes 2 people, 2.5 maybe on a super busy day. We're not that busy. It could be busier, but then that comes with its own set of problems. And so, like I check in throughout the week. I log in on the Saturday morning and the Sunday morning, kind of just going over the numbers, doing the bookkeeping, reconciling all of the orders, paying them on time, setting up their rosters, and I suppose like addressing their emotional needs as well. We have become very much, I hesitate to say the word family, but because that I think there's a very, very fine line there of like, these are people that I employ, but these are also people who I've come to like really love and have a very specific affection for. But they have become part of like this quirky little work family. And so that's been my day to day. I've been far enough removed from day to day operations since, last year, even before I was considering the move to Melbourne. And my big litmus test for that. And it took a while to actually like not show up to work, but my big litmus test was when I started making mistakes behind the bar and I would get corrected, and um, the regulars would be surprised to see me, and like pleasantly surprised to see me and like greet me and do all that stuff. But it was very clear that I was not needed. I love that. I love that because it is the complete opposite of like early days at the shop. I was there like 7 days a week when we were still trading 7 days a week, like 8-9 hours a day. Not sustainable. No one do that ever. Or do it and then realize, please, take care of yourself. But in the early days when it was just me to start and I was just in the middle of hiring and training like a new group of people, like if I wasn't there, people would look for me. The regulars would look for me. And like I would chafe, like I would physically chafe against that. And so to get to this point where no one's looking for me at all, happy days.
Yeah. So what does that feel like to have that different role, to be there and not necessarily know everything and be the best at everything? What does it feel like to be so far removed from something that you created and still own?
Like to be obsolete, to use your term.
Yeah.
Freaking amazing. Because again, like we come back to this, it can be, it's such a double-edged sword of like, for a while I was the brand, and I hate that term, but it is true. Like a small business, most small businesses that are owner operated, it is very much the person behind the counter that you see 24/7 that you associate with the business. And to get to this stage where I haven't been back to, well, when was I last there? I was there maybe like a couple months ago, and I popped in briefly because like working for Square out of Perth versus Melbourne, I'd have to be in a different time zone, and I would actually miss the opening hours of my shop. So I popped in a couple of lunch breaks, and I didn't have to do anything. Like I just sat in a chair in the back, just watching this beautiful ballet of like, and it is a ballet. It is a bit of a ballet, like to just have two very switched on people just run the show in a super efficient, and yet like it's efficient but friendly, if that makes sense, which again is very much the kind of service that I look for. Like warm, approachable, but like, okay, next sort of thing, if you're in line. But yes, it feels good not being needed.
That's huge. Yeah. So with that, what's next for you and the business? Are you planning on staying in the same role, switching things up? What are you thinking?
Such a personal question. um, but a really good one. I have actually been actively trying to, actively, my version of actively, which is not very active at all. I have been kind of trying to sell the business, mainly because I also recognize that it's probably not sustainable for me to be working a full-time job and running a business and addressing the emotional needs of a couple of people, plus some, casual staff that we have, plus like having a personal life and exercising and feeding myself. Again, like I said, very personal question, but I am trying to sell it. But also, I think the reason why I haven't been trying too hard, or why I haven't advertised it very much, is because maybe I'm also not ready. And what I've been telling people is the line that I've been feeding people, and I guess they're all going to know now, is it's a very specific type of business to run. For you to make any sort of financial return as an owner operator, you do kind of have to work in the business. And it's a small team, so you would have to fire or wait for one of the staff or both of them to go. So it's a very specific thing to sell. And I've had a few, I've entertained a few buyers, a number of them over the past year and a little bit. And they just haven't quite been the right fit, or they haven't seemed prepared enough to take on that kind of responsibility. I could just sell it to the person who offers like X amount of dollars, but at the same time, there is very much that little voice in the back of my head going like, well, you work really hard. I worked really hard, but also the staff has worked really hard to build it up to where it is at the moment. Um, but yeah, short answer is like I will probably sell it at some point, so then I can get a bit more of my time back. But also, I enjoy working, maybe a little bit too much, and I'm okay with where I'm at the moment. But check back in a month or so, and we'll see.
Sounds good. We could definitely do a follow up. Yeah, I totally get that. It's on all of those levels. I mean, just balancing a business. If you're working full time, it's often over full time to just run your own business, and then to have a full time job running a business, and like you said, just being a human and taking care of yourself, especially when those feelings of burnout and stress and business owners have a very high rate of depression. It's a massive thing because of that stress. So it's same. Yeah, it's tough. So I'm glad that you are listening to your needs and not rushing anything, and following what you can do at the moment that you can, and still thinking about what your options are, and even then, like, wanting to stay true to what you built and not just jumping for the money and wanting it to live on. That's huge. How do you feel? Like, how do you?
It's funny because I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
Well, because my just on what you said, I don't know if you've done the same thing, or if it's been a work in progress for you as well, where you kind of what the triggers are before burnout starts kicking in again. Because I think for me, burnout has very much been a case of, it started early and I sort of addressed it, and then it came back, and then I kind of tried to address it again, and it worked better that second time. But it's very much it's a process. It doesn't go away completely. I also have noticed that I'm just not as quick on my feet anymore. I don't know if it's something like mental elasticity is not quite the same pre-burnout, but I don't know if you do this thing where you can tell just before it's about to happen, or you can kind of anticipate it. Because you and I feel like we have been in very similar boats. How does that look like for you? I feel great right now, but how do you feel?
Yeah, great question. It's absolutely a journey. Like, it's never over. I sold my business 2 years ago, and I've had much less depression, anxiety, and stress because of that shift. But I definitely can tell the signs. I've done a bunch of therapy. I need to restart it soon. And it's helped for me to notice the signs. Like, one of my big realizations, like when I know I'm starting to get depressed, I know I'm starting to get hyper anxious, is staying up really late. That's like, okay, if I notice that I'm going to sleep at 1 or 2 in the morning, like, okay, I'm on the path, and I need to address things. Like, back when I had the shop, I jumped into the business. I started when I was 13, 14, opened it up with my dad. I was in and out because I was a kid. And then in 2016, I jumped back in full time. And in the beginning, it was a really tough transition because we were 2 of us trying to divide up the roles and figuring out what our places were in this business. And initially, I was running front of house and training employees and managing staff and doing all of that. And I was getting very burnt out. Like, that was not the type of role that I liked. And my dad and I had a conversation like, hey, this is not working for me. He didn't like doing the back of house either. So I found myself getting hyper anxious, getting hypersensitive, getting angry a lot. Like, that's a big thing. And I knew we had to make a change. So we switched up. So I took over back of house. He took over front of house. And just that switching of the role made a massive difference. And continuing, like you said, trying to keep making those shifts, seeing what triggered me and trying to avoid those triggers and shift my role accordingly. At this point, being out of owning a business, it's a lot better. Like, there are very clear boundaries to my day. I can have a steady routine each day, throughout the week, throughout each month, and throughout the year. And having a routine has helped tremendously for me.
I just have a follow-up question and I'll answer it before I ask you. But like, my answer to this is yes. Would you do it again? Knowing what you know now, would you do it again?
Would I go back in? Would I go back in time and do it again, or would I do it again tomorrow?
If you had to do it, if you had like, oh, that's a good one. Don't add. Like, if you know, knowing what you know now, if you had a second chance at it, if the opportunity came up either tomorrow, like 3 months from now, a year from now, like, would you do it again? No judgment, but I would do it again.
First, let's hear your answer. This is your interview.
Yeah, I would do it again. Like, because I feel like I've learned, it's a lot of like prefacing, right? Like, I feel like I've learned so much about myself as well. Like, now I know what my boundaries are. Whereas before I was someone who's very much like, let's work all the time. Whereas now I'm like, okay, no, you can't do that. And it's, I don't know if other people are like this, but it was very much like it's a vanity project. I'll be the first to admit that. It was a bit of a vanity project. It was a selfish way for me to be like, look at what I can do. And now I've learned what my boundaries are.
Yeah, it's a great point. My initial gut reaction was no. But also, I've been like, I'm 2 years out, but it still feels so fresh. Like, I would need more time to do it again. And then hearing your answer, like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, having this time away from it, I've learned so much, just in my own self-reflecting and working for someone else, in learning so much from other business owners like you. I've learned what to do the next time around. So if I do it again, I definitely would be better off, but I am not jumping and itching to open another business anytime soon, for sure.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Very
with
diplomatic.
that leads into my next question. If you were starting again, what would you do differently? Like, what are those boundaries you would set, and how would you run things if you were to do it again?
I probably would have like maybe saved more money before I did it, because cash flow, as I've learned, cash flow is very much like, businesses live and die by their cash flow. And I think for a hospitality business where you're having to, specifically like a brick and mortar cafe, like, sure, we're small, but it's not cheap to build things from scratch. And we had to build things from scratch. And that would have been the time when materials, like materials and labor, were very hard to come by because of the COVID and logistics shortages and all that stuff. Yeah, I probably would have waited until I had more money to like put down on the table. I also, that's a really good question. I still would do things very similarly, where having those standards and systems and procedures, like, it's really good to start. But even before we opened, like, I took the time to externalize them, to like put them down, to put them into like a project management software, which is actually what I use to run the shop remotely. But a lot of it, like, I learned as I went, as you do. I think I opened it at the right time. Like, I was 28. Oh, 28? Yes, I was 28, which is crazy. Yeah, I don't think I would have had the right energy, like physical energy, if I'd opened it. I'm like 31 now and I feel exhausted. I don't think I could do it now. So I think I did it at the right time. But if I had a do-over, I would maybe like try to have more in the bank before I did anything.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's really, I think that's a good full circle point. Like your strength is the operations, your strength is the logistics. And by spending that time to create the systems before the shop even opened, to have all that in place really enabled you to be where you are now, that you can have your staff and you have your managers follow those systems, that you can take a step back. That's an immense amount of skill that is a very difficult thing to master. And it's pretty incredible that that's what you've been able to accomplish and are where you are now. It's huge. I think the last question I have is more open-ended. Do you have anything else that you want to share? Anything else that you've learned and picked up or experienced that some other business owners would benefit from hearing?
Take a lunch break, honestly. Don't forget to feed yourself. Don't, because like, I'm someone who like, I actually don't get hungry until like 3 p.m. And I don't know if that's just a thing that's developed because you start the day at like what, 5:45, 5:30, and then you basically have to be switched on when other people are taking their break, because that's running a cafe. So I would encourage people to sit down over a really nice lunch or a nice dinner, glass of wine, maybe reflect on your boundaries, but also don't forget to feed yourself. Don't forget to look after yourself, because, you know, for a long time running a business, you are technically the foundation. And if that foundation is not stable, the whole thing's going to collapse on you. And easier said than done. I am the last person who will listen to that advice. I will continue to not eat lunch. But it's worth saying for anyone out there who needs to hear it, take a break. It's okay. The shop will still be there tomorrow. It'll be fine.
Yeah, that's huge. I relate to that so much. And I think it's at the core of hospitality. We created this thing whose purpose is to take care of other people. So, and like you said, we internalize the identity of being connected to that business. So we internalize taking care of other people and not ourselves. So that is fantastic advice. I am working on it. I also am horrible at it, but that's us. We're getting better.
Work in progress.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much again for sharing so much of your experiences and your learnings and just you and what you've brought to your business. That's wonderful.
Thanks for talking to me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Do you want to plug anything? Where can folks find you in the business online or in the form?
For a second, I was like, come work for Square. Quokka Coffee, we're on Instagram, Quokka Coffee Perth. Truly terrible at Facebook, don't even try. But Instagram, we're there. We have a website. But also, like, if you're in WA, come swing past. Like, but only swing past on the weekdays because we're busy having our weekends. But that's us. Tiny but mighty little shop in WA. Most isolated city in the world, but we'll show you a good time if you come visit.
Good to know. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll definitely have to swing by at some point. All right. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the community.